Modern agriculture is obsessed with products. Which fertilizer? Which formula? Which brand? Which technology? Farmers debate nitrogen sources like sports teams. Consultants argue about inhibitors, coatings, slow release, biological blends. Sales presentations stack charts, trials, and promises, all centered around one assumption. If the product is right, the outcome will be right. That assumption is wrong. The most expensive fertilizer mistake in modern farming is not what is applied to the soil. It is when it is applied. Timing is the variable nobody markets because timing does not come in a bag. Every year, farmers lose millions not through visible failure, but through invisible loss. Nutrients leave the system quietly. No alarms, no warning lights, no yield map screaming for attention. Just money that never becomes biomass. The field looks fine, the crop emerges, the season moves on, and the loss has already happened. This is why fertilizer timing is such a dangerous mistake. It doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like routine. Applications follow calendars, not conditions. Dates, not dynamics. Habits, not biology. Nitrogen goes down because it's time. Phosphorus goes down because we always do it now. Potassium goes down because the spreader is already here. None of these reasons are agronomic. They are logistical, and logistics is not the same thing as soil readiness. Soil is not a container waiting to be filled. It is a living, reactive system. Temperature, moisture, microbial activity, oxygen availability, and carbon flow determine whether nutrients are held, transformed, or lost. Apply fertilizer when the soil cannot process it, and the soil does not store it for later like a savings account. It leaks. Volatilization, leaching, denitrification, fixation, each one is a silent exit door. Take nitrogen as the clearest example. When urea-based nitrogen is applied to cool, wet, or residue-covered soil without immediate incorporation or rainfall, volatilization begins almost immediately. Ammonia gas escapes into the atmosphere. Not slowly, not eventually, rapidly. By the time the crop actually needs nitrogen, part of the investment is already airborne. The farmer doesn't see smoke. The field doesn't look damaged. The loss shows up months later as lower efficiency or unexpected response variability, which then gets blamed on the product. But the product did exactly what chemistry and physics said it would do. The same story repeats with leaching. Apply soluble nitrogen too early in a system with excess moisture and insufficient root activity, and nitrate moves downward with water. Past the root zone, out of reach, gone, not because the fertilizer was weak, because the timing was wrong. This is where modern agriculture gets uncomfortable, because timing mistakes implicate management, not suppliers. And management is personal. It's easier to believe a fertilizer didn't work than to accept it worked perfectly, just not when the plant was ready. Plants do not care about application dates. They care about growth stages. Roots do not absorb nutrients because they exist. They absorb nutrients because demand is active. When fertilizer is applied before that demand exists, the soil becomes a temporary holding zone under stress. Some nutrients bind, some transform, some leave. The longer the gap between application and uptake, the higher the risk. This gap is where millions disappear. And this loss compounds. Early season nitrogen loss reduces canopy development. Reduced canopy limits photosynthesis. Lower photosynthesis reduces carbon exudation into the soil. Reduced carbon starves microbial populations that regulate nutrient cycling. One mistimed application cascades into an entire season of inefficiency. Yet most fertility programs are still front-loaded. Heavy early applications, justified by convenience, weather risk, or tradition. The logic is simple. We need to get it on before we can't. But before we can't is not the same as when the plant can use it. That difference is the core mistake. The tragedy is not that farmers apply fertilizer. It's that they apply it at the wrong moment and never get feedback that the moment mattered. No invoice lists volatilization losses. No yield map labels leaching events. No soil test shows what left the system 3 weeks earlier. The system hides its own inefficiency. And hidden inefficiency is expensive. This is why fertilizer timing is costing farmers millions without headlines, without scandals, without lawsuits. Just quiet erosion of margins. In the next part, we will break down why timing errors are structurally baked into modern farming systems, and why even highly skilled farmers repeat them year after year. Modern farming does not fail because farmers are careless. It fails because the system rewards speed, not precision. Everything around fertilizer application is optimized for movement, equipment width, labor windows, weather gaps, input delivery schedules, crop insurance deadlines. None of these systems are built around plant physiology. They are built around logistics. And logistics hates waiting. The moment soil conditions are good enough, the pressure starts. Spread now, apply now, get ahead of the season. Because once planting starts, everything becomes chaos. So fertility gets pushed earlier and earlier, justified as risk management. But agronomically, early application is not risk management. It is risk displacement. The risk does not disappear. It simply moves into the soil system, where it becomes invisible. This is how timing mistakes become normalized. They are not seen as mistakes. They are seen as operational necessities. A farmer who delays fertilizer to match crop demand is labeled risky. A farmer who applies early and loses efficiency is labeled responsible. That inversion is one of the most expensive cultural errors in agriculture. Look at how recommendations are framed. Apply before planting. Apply at green up. Apply ahead of rainfall. These phrases sound precise, but they are vague. They reference calendar moments, not biological thresholds. Plants do not experience before planting. They experience root initiation, leaf expansion, stem elongation. Soils do not respond to green up. They respond to temperature crossing activation thresholds, moisture stabilizing oxygen flow, microbial respiration accelerating. By ignoring these dynamics, timing becomes blunt instead of surgical. The result is fertilizer placed into systems that are not yet awake. Cold soils slow microbial conversion of nitrogen. Phosphorus remains locked in forms roots cannot access. Potassium movement stalls in dry profiles. Meanwhile, rainfall does not wait for roots to be ready. Water moves. Nutrients move with it. This is where early losses explode. Not dramatically, quietly, and the system reinforces the behavior. Because yields often remain acceptable, the crop survives. It grows. The loss hides inside averages. A farmer might lose 20% of applied nitrogen early and still harvest a decent crop. That does not feel like failure. It feels like confirmation, but multiply that loss across acres, seasons, and rising fertilizer prices. The margin bleed becomes brutal and still invisible. Another structural problem is recommendation inertia. Fertility programs are often copied forward year after year. Same timing, same rates, same logic. Adjustments happen only after obvious failure. Timing mistakes rarely cause obvious failure. They cause mediocre efficiency, and mediocre efficiency is tolerated. The system also trains farmers to think in totals instead of flows. Pounds per acre, units applied, cost per ton, rarely uptake curves. Plants do not absorb nutrients evenly over time. Uptake follows demand spikes. Miss the spike, and late applications struggle to compensate. Early applications leak before demand arrives. Timing is about synchronization. Modern systems are asynchronous. Even technology has not solved this. Variable rate application adjusts where fertilizer goes, not when it becomes available. Enhanced efficiency products slow loss, but they do not eliminate mismatch. They buy time. They do not fix timing logic. The deeper issue is that fertilizer timing requires patience. And patience does not scale easily. Waiting for the soil to be biologically ready feels like gambling. Applying early feels like control. Control is comforting, even when it is fake. This is why timing mistakes persist even among top producers. Knowledge alone does not override system pressure. You can understand nutrient cycling perfectly and still apply too early because the sprayer is available, the weather window is open, and the calendar says, now. The system does not punish this immediately. It punishes it slowly, and slow punishment is easy to ignore. In the next part, we will zoom into what actually happens inside the soil when fertilizer is applied too early, and why those processes are almost impossible to reverse once triggered. That's where the money truly disappears. Soil does not wait. The moment fertilizer touches the surface or enters the profile, chemistry and biology begin working on it. Not later, not when the crop emerges. Immediately. This is the part most fertility plans ignore. They treat soil like a warehouse. Apply now, store it, retrieve it later. That mental model is wrong. Soil is a reactor. When nutrients enter the system before plant demand exists, they are exposed to forces that have nothing to do with yield and everything to do with entropy. Nitrogen is the most obvious casualty. Urea hydrolyzes. Ammonium forms. Without rapid uptake or stabilization, conversion pathways open. Volatilization occurs at the surface. Nitrification accelerates when conditions allow. Nitrate forms, and nitrate does not wait politely in the root zone. It follows water. Early season soils are often wet, poorly aerated, and biologically imbalanced. Oxygen levels fluctuate, microbial communities shift. Under these conditions, denitrification becomes active. Nitrogen leaves the system as gas. No visual symptom appears, no warning, just absence. Phosphorus behaves differently, but it also punishes bad timing. Applied when soil temperatures are low and biological activity is minimal, phosphorus binds aggressively to iron, aluminum, or calcium depending on pH. Once fixed, it becomes slow to release. By the time roots are actively exploring, much of that phosphorus is present but unavailable. It exists, it just doesn't help. Potassium, often assumed stable, moves through diffusion. Dry early soils slow that movement. Excess moisture pushes it downward. Timing determines whether potassium sits where roots can reach it or drifts into irrelevance. These processes are not errors. They are normal soil behavior. The mistake is pretending they are optional. Once triggered, these pathways cannot be undone. You cannot recover volatilized nitrogen. You cannot easily remobilize fixed phosphorus during peak demand. You can only apply more and hope to compensate. This is how timing mistakes inflate fertilizer rates. Loss leads to response gaps. Response gaps lead to higher rates. Higher rates lead to higher losses. A feedback loop of inefficiency. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The soil does not care how expensive fertilizer is. It reacts the same way whether nitrogen costs pennies or a fortune. The loss is proportional to timing, not price. Rising fertilizer costs do not cause better timing. They amplify the penalty for bad timing, which is why modern margins feel tighter even when yields look stable. Another hidden effect of early application is biological starvation. Microbes rely on carbon inputs from roots. Early in the season, those inputs are minimal. Flood the soil with nutrients before carbon arrives, and microbial populations shift toward survival, not cycling. Instead of building nutrient bridges to roots, microbes compete, immobilize, or transform nutrients away from plant-available forms. The soil becomes chemically rich and biologically poor. By the time roots arrive, the system is already misaligned. This is why late-season deficiency symptoms often appear in fields that received plenty of fertilizer. The nutrients were there, just not when or where the plant needed them. Timing failure does not always reduce total uptake. It reduces uptake efficiency. The plant works harder to get less. Stress increases. Resilience drops, yield becomes fragile, and fragility is expensive in variable seasons. In the next part, we will expose why soil tests and tissue tests often fail to reveal timing mistakes, and how farmers are misled into thinking fertility is fine while money drains away. Farmers trust numbers, soil tests, tissue tests, lab reports with decimals that look scientific enough to calm the mind. And here's the problem. Most of these tools are terrible at revealing timing mistakes. Not because they are useless, because they answer the wrong question. Soil tests measure presence, not performance. They tell you nutrients exist in the system. They do not tell you whether those nutrients were available during peak demand, whether they arrived too early, or whether half of them already left before roots showed up. A soil test taken weeks after application can look perfect. Nitrogen levels acceptable, phosphorus high, potassium adequate, and yet, the crop still struggles later. Because timing loss does not always empty the soil. It changes availability windows. A nutrient can test present and still be functionally absent when the plant needs it most. Tissue tests are not much better. They are snapshots. They capture what the plant managed to absorb, not what it failed to access earlier. By the time deficiency shows up in tissue, the opportunity to correct efficiently is often gone. Timing mistakes happen upstream of diagnostics. They occur before symptoms, before measurements, before alarms. This creates a dangerous illusion of control. The farmer did the test, followed the recommendation, applied the product, the numbers said, okay. So when performance slips, the instinct is to blame weather, genetics, or one of those seasons. Not timing. Another issue is averaging. Soil samples blend zones of success with zones of loss. Hot spots and dead zones disappear into a mean value that looks fine on paper and useless in practice. Timing errors are spatially uneven. Loss concentrates where conditions allow it, but averages smooth out the crime scene. The lab report becomes an alibi. This is why timing mistakes persist even in data-driven operations. The data does not scream. It whispers, and whispers are easy to ignore when equipment is rolling and the season is moving. There's also a psychological trap. Tests feel proactive. Timing requires restraint. Running a test feels like action. Waiting to apply feels like hesitation. Modern agriculture rewards action, movement, progress. Timing discipline feels passive, even though it is one of the most active management decisions possible. This mismatch trains farmers to overtrust tools that confirm effort instead of outcomes. In the next part, we'll confront the myth of getting it on early to be safe, and why that logic collapses the moment you look at plant demand curves instead of calendars. Better early than late. That sentence has probably cost agriculture more money than most pests. It sounds logical. If fertilizer is on the field, the crop won't run out. If weather turns bad, at least nutrition is covered. Early application feels like insurance. But agronomically, early is not safer. It is simply earlier exposure to loss. Plants do not reward preparedness. They reward synchronization. Look at any nutrient uptake curve. Nitrogen demand is low at emergence, modest during early vegetative growth, and then spikes rapidly. Phosphorus demand follows root expansion. Potassium uptake accelerates as biomass accumulates. None of these peaks occur when most fertilizer is traditionally applied. So early fertilizer does not wait. It degrades. The insurance metaphor fails because insurance does not leak when it rains. Nutrients do. What farmers call safety is often just deferred inefficiency. The irony is that late applications are feared for visible reasons. Miss a side dress window and deficiency symptoms can appear quickly. Early losses, on the other hand, stay invisible. Humans fear visible failure more than invisible waste. So the system biases toward early timing, even though the math is worse. Another misconception is that early fertilizer builds soil reserves. In reality, soil reserve building depends on biology and carbon flow, not on dumping nutrients into inactive systems. Without roots feeding microbes, nutrients do not integrate. They float, bind, or leave. This is why fields with heavy early fertility often show poor in-season response. The soil was fed before it could digest. Early timing also reduces flexibility. Once nutrients are applied, management options shrink. You cannot pull them back. You can only add more. Late timing allows adjustment. Early timing locks decisions in. From a risk perspective, late but precise beats early and blunt. Every time. The tragedy is that the myth persists because it feels responsible. It looks organized. It satisfies logistics. It calms anxiety, but it does not maximize profit. In the next part, we'll expose how fertilizer timing quietly reshapes yield potential long before you can see it, and why by the time yield loss is visible, the decision is already months old. By the time yield loss becomes visible, the decision that caused it is already old. Weeks old, sometimes months. This is the most dangerous aspect of fertilizer timing mistakes. They operate early, but they express late. The crop pays the bill long after the moment anyone remembers the transaction. Yield potential is not built at harvest. It is built during early structure. Leaf area, root architecture, tillering, node formation. These processes happen when nutrient demand is ramping, not when fertilizer is traditionally applied. When timing is wrong, the crop doesn't crash. It compromises. It builds a smaller factory. Less leaf area means less photosynthesis. Less photosynthesis means less carbon. Less carbon means weaker biological support in the soil. The system tightens. Once that ceiling is set, no amount of late fertility can raise it fully. You can protect yield. You cannot recreate potential that was never built. This is why rescue applications feel disappointing. They correct symptoms, not structure. A late nitrogen application might green the crop. It rarely rebuilds lost architecture. The plant reallocates resources to survive, not to expand. Timing errors shrink the upside. And this is where the real money is lost. Not in obvious deficiency, in missed opportunity. Farmers often chase yield with more fertilizer, not realizing the window to convert fertilizer into structure already closed. The response curve flattens, costs rise, returns stall. It looks like diminishing returns. It is actually missed timing. Another subtle effect is root behavior. Roots grow toward nutrients. When nutrients are placed early but move or bind before roots arrive, roots explore less aggressively. The plant assumes scarcity. Later, even when nutrients are added, root architecture is already set. Uptake capacity is limited. You cannot retrofit roots. This is why split applications outperform single early applications even at the same total rate. Not because more nutrient exists, but because timing aligns with developmental checkpoints. Yield is a biological negotiation. Timing determines leverage. Miss the moment, and the plant settles for less. In the next part, we'll get practical and uncomfortable. How modern fertilizer programs accidentally train farmers to repeat timing mistakes, even when data says otherwise. Most fertilizer programs are not designed around crops. They are designed around convenience. One plan, one date, one pass. This is sold as simplicity. In practice, it is rigidity. Standard fertility programs reward compliance, not observation. Apply X by Y date. Check the box. Move on. The crop becomes a passenger. Timing discipline requires flexibility. Flexibility does not fit cleanly into preseason plans or sales schedules. So programs flatten biology into calendars. Even advanced programs often fail here. They layer products, not timing logic. Stabilizers, coatings, biological additives. All useful tools, all still applied too early. Technology becomes a crutch for impatience. Instead of asking, is the crop ready? The system asks, what can we add to protect early application? That question assumes early application is non-negotiable. That assumption is the mistake. Fertility programs also externalize responsibility. If timing fails, blame weather. If response is weak, blame genetics. If efficiency drops, blame the product. Timing rarely appears in postmortems because no one owns it. And because no one owns it, it repeats. Another quiet issue is benchmarking. Farmers compare themselves to neighbors. If everyone applies early and gets similar yields, the practice feels validated. But shared inefficiency still loses money. Uniform mediocrity looks like success when there's no counterexample. Programs also discourage in-season adjustment. Once rates are set and inputs purchased, changing timing feels like breaking the plan. So even when conditions scream, wait, momentum wins. This is not a knowledge gap. It is a structural trap. In the next part, we'll flip the script and show what timing-first fertility actually looks like, and why it feels uncomfortable at first. Timing-first fertility sounds simple. It is not easy, because it requires abandoning the calendar as the primary decision-maker. Instead of asking, what date is it, timing-first systems ask different questions. Is the soil biologically active? Are roots expanding or just surviving? Is nutrient demand accelerating or flat? This shifts fertilizer from a preseason event to an in-season conversation. Rates become secondary, timing becomes primary. In timing-first systems, early applications are lighter, not heavier. They serve as ignition, not fuel. The bulk of nutrition arrives when the crop can actually use it. This feels risky to farmers trained to front-load. The field looks underfed early. Anxiety spikes. But biologically, the system is aligned. Split applications are not about spoon-feeding. They are about synchronizing. Instead of forcing the soil to hold nutrients, you let the crop pull them. Roots signal demand. Microbes mobilize supply. Loss pathways shrink because nutrients spend less time exposed. This is where efficiency jumps. Timing-first fertility also reframes weather risk. Rain is no longer the enemy after application. It becomes a delivery mechanism when timing is correct. And dry periods matter less because nutrients are already in the active zone when growth resumes. The biggest mental shift is accepting that unused fertilizer is not potential. It is liability. Timing-first systems aim to minimize time in soil without uptake. This is why they often use smaller doses more often. Not because the crop needs less, but because exposure windows shrink. In the next part, we'll confront why timing-first management feels uncomfortable but consistently outperforms, and why farmers who adopt it rarely go back. Timing-first fertility feels wrong because it removes a familiar illusion: control. Front-loading fertilizer gives a sense of certainty. Inputs are purchased, nutrients are applied, the box is checked, progress feels real. Timing-first management replaces that certainty with observation, and observation feels passive to systems trained for action. Waiting for the right moment looks like doing nothing, even though it is one of the most aggressive profit-protecting decisions a farmer can make. This discomfort is psychological, not agronomic. The crop does not panic when nutrients are not all present on day one. The farmer does. Timing-first systems expose how much early application is driven by fear, not by plant demand. Fear of weather, fear of delays, fear of being behind. But being early is not the same as being ahead. Another reason timing first feels wrong is visibility. Early fertilizer is visible, spreaders run, fields change color. It feels productive. Correct timing often happens quietly. Smaller applications, less spectacle, less reassurance, yet the results compound. Better early vigor, stronger canopy, more uniform stands, less mid-season stress. Once a farmer sees that alignment, going back to calendar-based fertility feels reckless. Because the crop starts responding faster, with less input, efficiency becomes obvious, loss shrinks, decisions feel lighter. This is why timing-first adoption spreads slowly but sticks permanently. It is hard to sell, but impossible to unsee. In the final part, we'll tie everything together and explain why fertilizer timing is not a technical tweak, but a profit philosophy, and why ignoring it will only get more expensive. Modern agriculture talks endlessly about inputs, fertilizer prices, seed technology, equipment efficiency, but margins are not won in catalogs. They are won in decisions. Fertilizer timing is not a detail. It is leverage. As fertilizer costs rise, timing mistakes hurt more. As weather volatility increases, early exposure becomes more dangerous. As margins tighten, inefficiency becomes fatal. The industry will continue selling products to protect early application. That is easy. That scales. What does not scale is patience. But patience is exactly what profitable systems are built on. Timing-first fertility does not eliminate risk. It reallocates it, away from invisible loss and toward informed decision-making. The farmers who will survive the next decade are not the ones applying more. They are the ones applying closer to demand. Because nutrients that arrive at the wrong time are not nutrients. They are expenses, and expenses compound quietly. This is the fertilizer timing mistake costing farmers millions. Not dramatic, not obvious, just constant. Fix the timing, and the math changes. Not because the soil changed, not because the crop changed, because the moment finally did.